Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Megillah, pages 7 through 13, Zayin through Yud Gimel. Zayin, 7. Rav Ashi Havayativ Kameh. Rav Ashi and Rav Kahana were together on Purim Day at the yeshiva. Nagav lo atu rabbanan, but the students were late in arriving to the yeshiva. Amalei my time lo atu rabbanan. So one asked the other, why are the rabbis so late in coming to the yeshiva today? The maturidi besudas Purim. So the response was, maybe they're busy with their Purim feast, or they're eating a big meal. It's a mitzvah to have a sudas Purim. But how come they could? So the other one asks, how come they couldn't eat it the night before, on the night of Yud Daled, the night of Purim? So the other one responded, don't you know what Rava said, that a person who eats their Purim Suda at night has not satisfied their obligation, therefore they have no choice, they must eat it during the day, and that's why they're late in coming to the yeshiva. Now it's important to understand why it is this conversation happened in the days of Rav Ashi. For you see, Purim was originally only a 12-hour holiday. The mitzvot all were done in the daytime, nothing was done the night before. At a later time, in the days of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the nighttime reading of the Megillah became a standard practice. Once that became a standard practice in Amoraic times, Purim essentially became a 24-hour holiday, not a 12-hour holiday. Once it is popularly regarded as a 24-hour holiday, there were those who might have believed you could have the Purim Suda at night, on the night of Yud Daled Adar. Therefore, it was necessary for Rava to remind everyone that even though there may be a nighttime Megillah reading, still the mitzvahs of Purim are properly observed only in the daytime, and a nighttime feast is no feast at all. Daf Chet, page 8. Ein bein Sfarim Tefillin and Mezuzos. There's no difference between Torah scrolls on the one hand and Tefillin and Mezuzah on the other. That Torah scrolls can be written in any language. Whereas Tefillin and Mezuzah can only be written in Ashurit, meaning in Hebrew. Rashbag, Shimon ben Gamliel says, even when it comes to Torah scrolls, they only allowed Greek, meaning all other languages are no good. It must be Hebrew or Greek. What is the basis for allowing Greek? The answer is from the pasuk in Parshat Noach, that the glory of Japheth, of Yefet, which is Greekdom, is going to enter into the tents of Shem, which is the Jewish people, the Beit Midrash. And so that's why Rashbag would say that a Torah scroll could be written in Greek. Daf Tet, 9. Masechet Talmud HaMelech. So the Talmud here recalls the story of Talmud, the king of Egypt. He took 72 scholars of Judaism and put them in 72 different rooms. He didn't tell them why he gathered them. And he went individually to each and every one of those sages. Write for me the Torah of Moses, your teacher, meaning write a Greek translation of the Chumash, of the Torah. And this is the Targum Shivim, the translation of the 70, the Septuagint. In our tradition, there are two schools of thought about whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. On the one hand, there is the perspective of it was Kasheli Israel, it was terrible for the Jewish people, Kiyom Shanasa Bo Ta'egel, like the day in which the golden calf was made. And the fast of the 10th of Tevet is in some respects a fast commemorating the translation of the Torah, because it gave access to the heathens to our holy scriptures, which they were not supposed to have. On the other hand, the Jews of the diaspora really did need it because they didn't understand Hebrew. And so for them, it was a worthwhile enterprise. So it's a mixed situation. There was some good and some bad. But the story in the Talmud says it was a miraculous occurrence in the sense that each one of these 72 elders wrote exactly the same translation. That even when they departed from the plain meaning of the text, when they tinkered with the text, they all did it in the same exact way so that nobody would get into trouble. Daf Yud. I heard, says one of the rabbis, that you're allowed to offer sacrifices at Beit Chonyo nowadays, meaning in the post-temple period, you're allowed to offer korbanot at the temple of Leontopolis, which was a Jewish temple in Egypt, founded by Chonyo, who had been the Kohen Gadol in Yerushalayim, but had been ousted from his position in the 170s before the Common Era. And for the next 200 years, there was functioning in Egypt a Jewish temple. The question is whether it has any legitimacy. So Gemara says, if you're going to tell me that it's allowed to offer korbanot there, it must be that the Beit Chonyo is not a place of idolatry. And the Kedusha Rishona Kitchelashata, that the first sanctification of Jerusalem was temporary, V'lo Kitchelas Ilava was not permanent, because if it were permanent, then sacrifices would be forbidden everywhere in the world other than on Har Habayit in Jerusalem. If you're telling me that in Egypt it's kosher to offer a korban, it must be because the Jerusalem sanctification was not permanent. Yud Aleph. 11. By Amimahem, Keshvet HaMelech Achashverosh. Quoting the Megillah, it was in those days when Achashverosh sat on his throne. Then it says in the third year of his reign. Amar Rava. So Rava says, "My Keshevet." What is the meaning of Keshevet as he sat? After his mind was settled. Why was his mind unsettled and how did it become settled? Amar Belshazzar that Belshazzar, my predecessor as a king, he made a mistake in reckoning the years of the 70 years of the Jewish exile from their land. And he prematurely celebrated the demise of the Jews. Whereas Achashverosh is saying that he's going to calculate the 70 years of the exile properly and then celebrate the demise of the Jews and not make a mistake. But in fact, he too made a mistake. Yud Bet, 12. So the students of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asked him, why was it that the Jewish people in that generation of Haman were deserving of devastation, of destruction? Ultimately, the devastation didn't come to pass, but why was it even a possibility that they would be deserving of it? Amar Lahem, Imru. So the Rebbe said, well, you tell me, you have a good question, but you give your answer. Amrulo, they said to him, because they benefited from the feast of that wicked person, that the Jewish people in Shushan, in the days of Achashverosh, were partying and partaking of the forbidden feast of Achashverosh, which aside from its prohibited foods, also was celebrating the demise of Israel. Yud Gimel, 13. That Esther had 7 maidens who were working for her. She would count the days of the week and know when Shabbos was on the basis of which girl was working for on any given day. And each one changed each day. And what they fed her Jewish food, meaning kosher food. Rabbi Yochanan says she ate zeronim, a vegan diet. Now what's going on here is that the Megillah itself is very secular. There's no reference to any religious ritual or Jewish practice in the Megillat Esther. And so the early readers of Esther were somewhat taken aback by that. And the goal was to make it sound more religious, more Jewish. And so in the Greek version of Esther, in the Septuagint, there is embellishments which make the text seem more religious. And in the Talmud also, here in the Gemara Megillah, we have these references that say that Esther kept Shabbos and Esther kept kosher, because the plain text doesn't say it. But if a heroine of a biblical tale is supposed to really be a heroine of our people, of the Jewish people, it must be that she was pious in the ritualistic sense. And so the embellishments in the Talmud refer to Shabbat and Kashrut. Everyone have a great week.